Welcome to Mindful Moments, where we nourish your mind on the go. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that might surprise you: the Department of Homeland Security. Buckle up, because we're using cutting-edge AI narration to make this journey even more immersive. And trust me, you won't want to miss this.
You know, what's often overlooked is that America's preoccupation with safety didn't begin with 9/11. The need to protect the nation has been a constant thread throughout our history.
Exactly. And today, we're using Rachel A. Koestler-Grack's book, The Department of Homeland Security, to trace the evolution of this crucial department from its earliest roots to its modern-day challenges.
We often think of national security as like a modern invention, but the need for protection is woven into the very fabric of American history.
Imagine the first colonists arriving on these shores, their hearts pounding with a mix of hope and fear. What were their immediate concerns?
Survival, pure and simple. Protecting their fledgling settlements and borders from Native Americans was paramount. It was a daily struggle against the unknown, a fight for their very existence.
It's a stark reminder that the desire for safety is a primal human instinct, something that transcends time and circumstance.
And perhaps even more surprising is the fact that domestic threats have often posed a greater danger to America than foreign enemies.
It's easy to assume that terrorism comes from outside, but history tells a different story. Take the Civil War, for example. The very fabric of the nation was torn apart, and the violence wasn't confined to battlefields. Think about those Confederate spies trying to burn down New York City. A chilling reminder that danger can lurk even within our own borders.
The Civil War was a turning point, exposing the need for internal security measures. It forced the nation to confront the reality that threats can arise not just from external forces, but also from within.
And then, of course, there's the horrifying legacy of the Ku Klux Klan. Their reign of terror demonstrated the dark side of human nature and the urgent need to safeguard not just physical borders, but also the very soul of a nation.
The KKK's actions serve as a stark reminder that threats to security can emerge from the shadows of society itself, fueled by hatred and prejudice.
Fast forward to the 20th century, and we encounter the Red Scare. The anxiety surrounding communism and socialism gripped the nation. The Wall Street bombing in 1920, still shrouded in mystery, reflects the climate of fear that permeated that era.
The Red Scare highlights how perceived ideological threats can lead to government actions that impact civil liberties. The Espionage and Sedition Acts, while intended to protect national security, raised concerns about the suppression of free speech and dissent. It's a tension that democracies continue to grapple with, finding the balance between security and individual rights.
And then, of course, there's Pearl Harbor, a date etched into the American psyche. It's almost like a historical echo of 9/11. The suddenness of the attack, the shock, the realization that America was vulnerable, even on its own soil.
The parallels between Pearl Harbor and 9/11 are undeniable. Both events shattered the illusion of invulnerability and triggered profound shifts in government policy and public perception.
And what's even more fascinating is that during World War II, German saboteurs actually landed on American shores. It sounds like something straight out of a spy thriller.
The story of those German saboteurs is a reminder that even in the midst of global conflict, threats can penetrate seemingly secure borders. It underscores the importance of intelligence gathering and counterintelligence operations, a constant battle fought in the shadows.
And then came the Cold War, a chilling era defined by the threat of nuclear annihilation. The arms race, the bomb shelters. It's almost surreal to think about it now.
The Cold War introduced a new dimension to national security, the constant fear of a nuclear apocalypse. It led to unprecedented investments in defense systems and a relentless pursuit of technological superiority.
But even as the world held its breath, fearing nuclear war, other threats emerged. Puerto Rican nationalists, Vietnam War protesters, the unsolved mystery of the LaGuardia airport bombing. It seems like a relentless tide of danger, constantly shifting and evolving.
What we see in the latter half of the 20th century is a diversification of threats. From domestic groups seeking political change to international actors with various agendas, the landscape of security challenges became increasingly complex and unpredictable.
And it's against this backdrop of ever-changing threats that modern terrorism takes root.
The evolution of modern terrorism can be traced back to the concept of guerrilla warfare, those little wars waged by insurgents against established powers. These unconventional tactics, often brutal and unpredictable, gradually morphed into the sophisticated and deadly forms of terrorism we see today.
So instead of massive armies clashing on open battlefields, we see a shift towards smaller, more agile groups exploiting weaknesses and using terror as a weapon.
Exactly. Think about it. Ambushes, sabotage, attacks on civilians. These tactics, while horrific, proved effective in disrupting traditional power structures and sowing chaos.
And one of the most striking examples of this new breed of terrorism emerged in the late 1960s with the rise of Palestinian terrorism.
The Six-Day War and the Munich Massacre were watershed moments. They brought Palestinian terrorism onto the global stage, demonstrating the power of these tactics to capture international attention and influence political agendas.
It's a chilling realization that terror could be used not just as a means of destruction, but also as a calculated tool to achieve political objectives.
And then there's Hezbollah, a group that emerged in the 1980s. Their attacks, like the bombings of the U.S. Embassy and Marine barracks in Beirut, demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of these tactics. The U.S. ultimately withdrew from Lebanon, a testament to the impact that terrorism can have on a global scale.
It's a sobering reminder that terrorism isn't just about the immediate casualties. It's about the long-term consequences, the fear it instills, and the way it can reshape the geopolitical landscape.
And then, of course, we have the emergence of Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda. The Soviet-Afghan War played a crucial role in bin Laden's rise. It was a training ground, a crucible where he forged alliances and honed his ideology.
And even before 9/11, there were warning signs. The 1993 World Trade Center bombing, the Day of Terror plot, is almost like a slow, terrifying drumbeat leading up to that catastrophic day.
Those early attacks were a clear indication that al-Qaeda had both the capability and the will to strike at the heart of America. They were testing the waters, probing for weaknesses.
And it wasn't just al-Qaeda. Events like the Oklahoma City bombing and the Aum Shinrikyo attack in Tokyo revealed a disturbing trend. Terrorism was becoming more decentralized, more unpredictable, and even more deadly.
The face of terrorism was changing. Groups like Aum Shinrikyo, with their apocalyptic ideologies and access to chemical weapons, demonstrated the potential for catastrophic attacks by non-state actors. It was a wake-up call, a realization that the old rules no longer applied.
It's like the enemy was morphing, becoming more elusive and more dangerous. Al-Qaeda in particular seemed to represent a new breed of terrorist organization.
Absolutely. Al-Qaeda differed from previous groups in its ideology, its global reach, and its willingness to inflict mass casualties. Their goal wasn't simply to make a statement or to disrupt. It was to fundamentally alter the world order.
And the 1999 Millennium Plot to bomb LAX is a chilling example of their ambition and ruthlessness. Even with increased security measures, it seemed that America remained vulnerable.
That foiled plot underscores the persistent challenge of preventing terrorism. Even with heightened vigilance and sophisticated security measures, the sheer number of potential targets and the ingenuity of terrorists make it a constant race against time.
And then, of course, came 9/11. The world changed forever. In the aftermath of that unimaginable tragedy, America grappled with the question, how do we prevent this from happening again?
The attacks of 9/11 were a watershed moment. They exposed vulnerabilities in America's security apparatus and led to a fundamental reassessment of how to protect the nation.
And that's where the Department of Homeland Security was born. This massive undertaking involved consolidating 22 different agencies, a testament to the scale and complexity of the challenge.
The formation of the DHS was a direct response to the 9/11 attacks. It was a recognition that a new approach was needed, one that would break down bureaucratic silos and create a more unified and effective security infrastructure.
So what exactly does the DHS do? It seems like its responsibilities are vast and multifaceted.
The DHS has a wide-ranging mandate, encompassing everything from border security and immigration enforcement to cybersecurity and disaster preparedness. It's tasked with protecting the nation from a multitude of threats, both foreign and domestic.
Let's break that down a bit. Border security seems like an obvious starting point. We've got thousands of miles of land and sea borders to protect. How does the DHS even begin to approach that?
The DHS employs a multi-layered approach to border security. It includes increasing the number of Border Patrol agents, deploying surveillance technology, and strengthening partnerships with local law enforcement. And after 9/11, we saw significant changes in the way we approach transportation security as well.
The changes at airports were dramatic, to say the least. Long lines, baggage screenings, full-body scanners. It was a whole new world.
The creation of the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, was a direct response to the 9/11 attacks. The goal was to enhance security measures and prevent future attacks, but it also led to increased wait times and heightened scrutiny for travelers.
And it wasn't just airports. Securing our land borders with Mexico and Canada also presented unique challenges.
The vast distances involved, the flow of legitimate trade and travel, and the constant threat of smuggling and illegal immigration make securing land borders a complex and multifaceted task. The DHS utilizes a variety of methods, including physical barriers, surveillance technology, and intelligence gathering to address these challenges.
But even with all those measures, it seems like there are still vulnerabilities, points of entry where determined individuals or groups could potentially exploit weaknesses.
Absolutely. Securing borders is a constant challenge, and there's no foolproof solution. The DHS must continuously adapt to evolving threats, employing a combination of technology, manpower, and intelligence to minimize risks.
And then there's the whole issue of emergency preparedness and response. FEMA falls under the umbrella of the DHS, right?
Yes, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, plays a crucial role in responding to natural disasters and other emergencies. It coordinates relief efforts, provides assistance to affected communities, and works to build resilience before disasters strike.
And we saw how critical that role is during Hurricane Katrina. The response to that disaster was widely criticized. There were communication breakdowns, logistical nightmares, and a lot of finger-pointing afterward.
Hurricane Katrina was a major test for FEMA, and it exposed weaknesses in the nation's emergency preparedness and response capabilities. The storm's devastating impact and the subsequent challenges in providing relief highlighted the need for improved coordination, communication, and resource allocation.
It makes you wonder, are we truly prepared for the next big disaster, whether it's a natural disaster or a terrorist attack?
That's a question that weighs heavily on the minds of those responsible for Homeland Security. The reality is that no amount of planning can fully anticipate every possible scenario or eliminate all risks.
So beyond boots on the ground and border patrols, what about the more technological aspects of Homeland Security? What about the science and technology side of things?
The Science and Technology Directorate is a key component of the DHS. It's tasked with developing and deploying cutting-edge technologies to enhance Homeland Security. They're working on everything from detecting biological threats and improving cybersecurity to developing new tools for first responders.
It sounds like they're on the cutting edge of innovation, trying to stay one step ahead of the bad guys. But what about the threat of cyber terrorism? That seems like a whole different ballgame.
Cybersecurity has become a paramount concern in the 21st century. The interconnectedness of our world means that a single cyber attack could have devastating consequences, disrupting critical infrastructure, crippling communication systems, and even compromising national security.
And the perpetrators of these attacks could be anyone, anywhere in the world. It's a daunting challenge for the DHS.
The Information Analysis and Infrastructure Protection Directorate within the DHS is specifically focused on safeguarding critical infrastructure and protecting our digital networks from attack. They work to identify vulnerabilities, develop countermeasures, and coordinate responses to cyber threats.
It seems like the scope of the DHS is just massive, encompassing so many different areas of responsibility. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. The Department of Homeland Security has a vast and complex mission, constantly evolving to meet new and emerging threats. And one of the most challenging aspects of its work is finding the balance between security measures and the protection of civil liberties.
It's a delicate balancing act, keeping the nation safe without encroaching on the freedoms that define us as Americans. It's a tightrope walk, and the stakes are incredibly high.
One of the most controversial examples of this tension emerged in the aftermath of 9/11 with the passage of the Patriot Act. This legislation expanded the government's surveillance powers in the name of national security, but it also raised concerns about potential overreach and the erosion of civil liberties.
The Patriot Act ignited a fierce debate that continues to this day. Supporters argued that it was a necessary tool to prevent future attacks, while critics worried that it granted the government too much power and infringed on the privacy rights of innocent Americans.
It's a classic dilemma. How much freedom are we willing to sacrifice for the sake of security? And where do we draw the line? These are questions that every democracy must grapple with.
And it's not just about legislation. Think about the heightened security measures we encounter every time we travel. Full-body scanners, pat-downs, restrictions on what we can carry on board. These measures have undoubtedly made air travel more secure, but they've also changed the way we experience it.
We've accepted a certain level of intrusion in exchange for greater safety. But it's important to continually evaluate those trade-offs and ensure that security measures are proportionate to the threats we face. We need to be vigilant about protecting our freedoms even as we strive to keep ourselves safe.
And it's not just the federal government that plays a role in Homeland Security. State and local governments, along with first responders, are on the front lines of any emergency.
Think about the police officers, firefighters, and EMTs who are the first to arrive at the scene of a terrorist attack or a natural disaster. They're the true heroes, often risking their own lives to save others. Their training, equipment, and ability to coordinate with other agencies are crucial to an effective response.
And they often face immense challenges, especially in smaller communities where resources may be stretched thin.
Ensuring that all levels of government have the resources and training they need to respond effectively to a wide range of threats is an ongoing challenge. It requires constant assessment, planning, and improvement. A commitment to preparedness that must be shared across all levels of government and society as a whole.
So as we look to the future, what are some of the key challenges facing the Department of Homeland Security? What threats are keeping them up at night?
The landscape of threats is constantly evolving. Cybersecurity, for example, has become a paramount concern as our reliance on technology grows. Protecting critical infrastructure from cyber attacks is a top priority for the DHS.
A single cyber attack could cripple our economy, disrupt essential services, or even sow chaos and panic. It's a sobering reminder of how vulnerable we are in this interconnected world.
And then there's the threat of bioterrorism, the deliberate release of deadly viruses or bacteria. It's a nightmare scenario, but it's one that the DHS takes very seriously.
The thought of a biological attack, whether intentional or accidental, is terrifying. The potential for widespread panic and loss of life is immense.
The DHS is investing heavily in biosurveillance, developing countermeasures, and improving our ability to respond to a large-scale biological event. But the reality is that the consequences of such an event could be catastrophic. Prevention is key, but we also need to be prepared for the worst.
It's a sobering reminder of the stakes involved. And it makes you realize that Homeland Security isn't just about protecting our physical borders. It's about safeguarding our way of life, our values, our very future.
That's a crucial insight. Homeland Security is ultimately about preserving the freedoms and principles that define us as a nation. It's about ensuring that we can live our lives without fear, that we can travel freely, that we can pursue our dreams in a safe and secure environment.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Homeland Security, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What's the one big idea you want them to remember?
I think the most important message is that Homeland Security is everyone's responsibility. We all have a role to play in keeping our communities safe. Whether it's being aware of our surroundings, reporting suspicious activity, or simply being prepared for emergencies, we can all make a difference.
Knowledge is power. And the more we understand about the threats we face and the measures being taken to protect us, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions and contribute to a safer nation. We can't simply leave it to the government to take care of everything. We all have a stake in this.
I couldn't agree more. We encourage you to learn more about this complex and ever-evolving issue. Rachel A. Koestler-Grack's book, The Department of Homeland Security, which we used as our mail source today, is a great starting point for anyone who wants to delve deeper. It provides a comprehensive overview of the department's history, structure, and challenges. You'll find a link to purchase the book in the show notes.
Thanks for joining us on this Mindful Moments deep dive into the world of the Department of Homeland Security. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. Remember to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of fascinating topics.
And one final thought to leave you with. We've seen how technology has reshaped the landscape of Homeland Security. It's a double-edged sword. It can be used to protect us, but it can also be used against us. As we develop new technologies to enhance security, we must be mindful of the potential consequences. How do we ensure that the very tools we create to keep us safe don't end up eroding the freedoms we cherish? That's a question worth pondering.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.